Wide receiver Keenan Allen has made it very clear that he wants to be back with the Chargers in 2026, but there might not be a place for him in Mike McDaniel's new offense.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day as part of the #1 sports podcast network. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, as you talked about, Keenan Allen stated that he wanted to be back with the Chargers in 2026, but was 2025 his swan song as a Charger? So we'll have to talk about that. And we got some great fan mail questions, including who could take that next leap out of the 2025 draft class next season. We're going to talk about that. And do we have confidence that Chris O'Leary can keep up that standard that the defense has set the last couple of seasons?
And with Jesse Minter leaving, he has big shoes to fill in that regard. But, David, let's start with Keenan Allen, who has kind of been in public recently saying that he wants to be back with the Chargers in 2026, which I think makes sense, right? I think he really wants to stay in LA where he lives. It's very warm, and someone that obviously has a familiarity and has seen what it's like to kind of test other waters when he got traded to the Bears for the 2024 season. But we do also have this Fan Mail Friday question from Joshua Hill saying, I'm currently watching the mini movie the Chargers dropped. Is this goodbye? I'm not ready. Never will be. Love you, bro. Talking about Keenan Allen. So I did watch it. It is worth watching, watching him kind of break the record last year. But there was kind of a solemnness to it where it kind of felt like a just in case video to put out there, right? In case he's not back. But it's very clear at this point that he wants to be back, which, is a good sign.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Keenan Allen is a legend in the Chargers organization, one of the best receivers in franchise history. We're talking about someone who was first in receptions, second in yards, third in touchdowns, and fifth in games played. Like, just a bona fide Chargers legend. A guy that we have had the absolute pleasure of being able to watch every single one of his games since he was drafted to this team in 2013. Obviously, with that one outlier with him playing the 2024 season in Chicago. But I think when you look at what Keenan Allen was able to do last year, he was still productive. I mean, he was available as well. He was playing in all 17 games. He had the most receptions on the team by 15. So a lot of targets too, 122 targets, which also led the team 777 yards and 4 touchdowns. And one of my favorite stats to always bring up is just the amount of his catches that go for first downs. 49 of his 81 receptions gained a first down in 2025. So the savant at picking up a third down conversion was on full display once again in 2025.
Yeah, when asked if he would still be playing in 2026, he said absolutely. He said, and was asked, on the Chargers, he said 100%. And I think there's a good reason to want to, statistically, right? He's only 15 catches away from being the only Chargers player in franchise history with 1,000 career catches in that uniform, which is awesome. He's already in first place after passing Gates this year. But also, he's only 534 yards away from Gates in all-time receiving yards. So if he comes back, that feels like a very attainable number to where not only could he be, the most yards ever, but also having the most receptions ever, kind of really solidifying it. I kind of like it that Gates has one and Keenan has one because it feels like that's how it kind of should be, both of them being very close because that's kind of the impact they've had. I mean, Antonio Gates obviously playing tight end, but a Hall of Fame tight end. But that means he has, more catches than Hall of Famers like Lance Alworth and Charlie Joyner and Kellen Winslow, and has more yards than all those guys too. So very crazy to see kind of how this career has unfolded for him. But now I think the bigger question just becomes, we know there's love on that side, and it felt like there was last season too, but it still took a long time in a Mike Williams retirement to get him on the squad. So I think the biggest question now is just, do the Chargers want him back in 2026?
That is the biggest question because, when you look at the Chargers wide receiver room, they have a couple of young wide receivers that they just drafted that didn't get a whole lot of playing time. And you can't help but, think that Keenan Allen's presence on this team was an impact to that. And not only to that, but also to Lad McConkey as well. And probably took him out of being the number one guy, or at least the number one read. And Keenan Allen, took that mantle up again, which, makes a lot of sense. Obviously, Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen have been on the same page for a very, very long time. But, at what point do you feel like Keenan Allen and the player he is and how he performs and what he brings to the table is going to take away from the opportunities and from what the other guys are able to bring to the table? So I think with that being said, it's a really tough question because Keenan is still a very productive wide receiver, but you're really sacrificing your explosive ability with Keenan for the reliability of him being able to make those sure catches. So I think it's going to be one of those big dilemmas in this 2026 offseason.
It really is. I think it's one of the tougher decisions. I mean, I can go up and down this Chargers roster and basically tell you guy for guy within 5 seconds whether I think they should be back or not.
Yeah.
Keenan, I have to wait the longest on, right? He's the guy that I have the most pause for because, yes, he was still very impactful, but also, no, he shouldn't be leading this team in targets in 2026, right? Yeah. So if he did come back, I would have to think it's in a more kind of diminished role. And a lot of the reason he had the production he had last year was because of the volume. And I do think that, yes, he has a great chemistry with Justin Herbert. On the flip side, I also feel like Justin Herbert kind of relies on Keenan Allen too much and that he shouldn't be the main read in some of these, right? So the other big question I think also is just, does he fit, right? Like, does he fit what they want to do offensively now? Because it's hard when the Mike McDaniel offense we saw in Miami was based so much on speed and anticipation and getting the ball in guys' hands for a guy that doesn't bring you anything after the catch, right? For a guy who's not a big kind of jump ball guy, because I do feel like if there was kind of one thing this team needed, it would be kind of that big physical presence on the outside that plays like that, right? Somebody that Justin Herbert can throw it up to, because obviously he had so much success doing that with Mike Williams. So I think when you're talking about a receiver, who did have 81 catches for 777 yards, but also a career low 9.6 yards per catch and a career low or tying a career low with only 4 touchdowns last year outside of the season where he only played in one game and had to miss the rest of the year with, I believe, a torn ACL. But that's, I think, the bigger thing is, okay, do the Chargers want it back? Does Mike McDaniel fit, or does he fit what Mike McDaniel is going to do? Because although it was different in Miami, we know that he will kind of fit the offense around the players that he has.
Yeah, which I think to me, like, how much can we look at what Mike McDaniel did in Miami because of how much that offense was really suited and really set up to try to accentuate the skill set of Tua Tagovailoa, which, is, a skill set that is a little bit more, it's not as, robust, right? There's not as many weapons that he brings to the table that Justin Herbert brings to the table. So this offense could look very different, but we know that, just as a core philosophy, he likes to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly. He likes to get in the hands of the playmakers, get yards after catch, get those easy buttons and those easy targets. And at this point in his career, Keenan Allen's not a yards after catch receiver. So, I mean, I think when you break it down that way, he doesn't really fit perfectly in the Mike McDaniel offense.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? How much different will it look? How much different do you want that offense to look when that offense, led the league in passing yards one year and had a running back average 5.7 yards per carry last year? But I'd say if the Chargers don't commit to him, a sneaky team that he could look into is the Saints, right? Who do have Kellen Moore, who was with him. And, Keenan, if we all remember that 2023 last season that had the 63-21 game, Keenan was balling out that season then ended up kind of just basically resting the last 4 games just because they didn't need him and the season was already lost. But
yeah,
he was about to put up ridiculous numbers in that Kellen Moore offense before they ended up, shutting him down basically. But it's hard because part of me wants them to give him a sweetheart deal so he could potentially retire as a Charger.
Yeah.
But it is hard to kind of see how he fits in with everything. Joe Ortiz was asked point blank if they want him back. He said yes, right? So that's what they're saying publicly. He also said he wasn't concerned about having too many good receivers in the wide receiver room. But I think it's more about a skill set match than anything else. But it is Fan Mail Friday, and we have some great questions to get into, including some potential year 2 guys who are going to way outproduce what they did as rookies in 2026. We're getting into that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs, because Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire someone for extra help for this show to maybe clean some things up post-production wise, because obviously the on-air talent is fantastic, I would go to Indeed and find a qualified candidate. But that's the big thing with them. When you have a job opening, you want it filled fast, but you also want it filled with a quality candidate. And according to the Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs, and it boosts your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now. Support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. David, let's get into some more fan mail questions that we have here. Thank you to all of the everydayers for, contributing to these shows and letting us know what you guys want to hear about in the offseason as we start switching gears a little bit more to a heavier free agency kind of profiles going into next week, and also getting into stay or go. And also, if you want an ad-free episode of this podcast every single day on the audio version of it, you can do that on the Locked On Everydayer Club, which I'll tell you about later in the show. But let's start with this good one here, David, which I think has a lot of answers, from Michael Angelo, who says, which second-year players from the 2025 draft will have higher production performances next season? The reason this is tough is because it feels like pretty much all of them could, right?
Yeah.
Outside of Verondé Gadsden, who obviously just had like a historic rookie season for a tight end and had over 600 yards and was 11th in the league in receiving yards. All of these guys for different reasons, like especially like Amarian Hampton, right? Because he played really well, but just barely got to play. But we've talked a lot about him. So, David, where would you start with the next guys who could see a big uptick in production going into year 2 from that 2025 draft class?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the second round pick with Trey Harris. I really liked watching Trey Harris just as a complete wide receiver for doing the dirty work. I mean, I don't look at the PFF grades when it comes to his blocking. I trust my eyes on what I saw, and what I saw was him getting out in front and really springing a lot of runs, being really effective in that aspect, because that's what they basically told him, or that's what his assignments were early on in the season. It was a lot of blocking and not a lot of opportunities in the passing game. Until towards the end of the season, where he started to get more opportunities. He had 5+ targets in 3 of the last 4 games. So they were really trying to figure out and get him more involved, and they were getting rewarded for that. 18 of his 30 receptions went for a first down as well. And the reason why I feel like he absolutely can explode in 2026 in Mike McDaniel's offense is the scheme, and the spacing is going to be so much better in Mike McDaniel's offense, which is going to help. And the jet motions, the being able to set up runways for Trey Harris, which will help him with, creating separation, because you just need to get the ball in his hands, and you get the ball in his hands and he can make some things happen after the catch. I have a lot of reasons to be excited for what Trey Harris can do and why he's going to take a big jump in 2026.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I think you look back at his rookie season, 30 catches, 324 yards, and a touchdown. I easily see him doubling that.
Oh, yeah.
In 2026, 648 yards, 60 catches. I think the touchdowns could go way up. I think the nice thing about him is I think he is a guy that can win down the field along the boundary and go up and get the ball if he needs to, right? And I think Mike McDaniel will help play to those strengths. Already a pretty decent route runner. Did show strong hands, but did struggle with that separation at times. And I do think that having this scheme will help him. And to your point, a very underrated after-the-catch runner, especially physically, right? The play stands out where he's, fighting for a first down, he's 3 yards short and ends up dragging a couple guys for it.
I love that.
That was awesome. But what about KOS? That's another guy to me, because it's very easy. and we'll talk about Kyle Kennard a little bit too, but to have a big jump when you really didn't do anything in 2025, and I do think he is kind of the most obvious person where we could look back at this and be like, and maybe it has to do with if Keenan Allen comes back or not, right? Now, how many opportunities there are. But to me, I still think he could be the best deep threat on this team, and I also think that if he's going in as wide receiver 5, that kind of sucks, right? Which if Keenan Allen comes back, that's kind of where he is behind Trey Harris, Quentin Johnson, Ladd McConkey as well. But I do think McDaniel is going to be intrigued by his skill set as a deep threat.
And I think that right there is the reason why I am bullish on why he is going to have a much better year in 2026 is because I'm convinced that Greg Roman didn't know how to use him properly. I don't remember more than just a handful of times that he got a chance to really go run down the field and really threaten and really try to run under a football. And it just didn't happen. You didn't really give him those chances. I mean, he only had 12 targets the entire season. He only played in 10 games. So he was, a healthy scratch for a couple of games this past season. He just didn't get those chances. And we know Mike McDaniel knows how to use speed. He did it to unbelievable effectiveness with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Got those guys big opportunities and big yards per reception numbers for both of those guys. So I can see KLS being a very, a 17, 18, 19 yards per catch guy with the right play caller who knows how to use speed.
Yeah, I think both those guys are going to outproduce what they did as rookies. But let's go to the defensive side, and we have a couple more to get here quickly because I do think that R.J. Mickens is another guy, especially because he didn't get started until several games into the season, right before he actually started to get playing time, not until week 6. But he still ended up playing 353 snaps. I mean, if they don't re-sign Tony Jefferson, which they should, and we'll have that conversation down the road, he's basically a starting safety since Derwin plays so much in the slot. But he's another guy where it feels like, man, he showed a lot as a rookie and should be a full-time player for them next year.
He was absolutely phenomenal last year. A passer rating allowed of only 12.5. He only allowed 4 receptions and 219 coverage snaps. He's in line for a lot more playing time. He's a guy that you could trust to be that last line of defender. He's more of a true free safety. I really like what he did last year. And I think Chris O'Leary coming back, being the defensive coordinator, being the guy that was the position coach for Derwin James when he got his, second team All-Pro nod for the first time in 2024 is going to bode really well for R.J. Mickens getting more opportunities in 2026.
Yeah, and if you include the playoffs, he had a passer rating allowed of 8.1, which doesn't even seem like it's real.
It's cartoonish.
It's also 10 targets, right? Very small sample size, but yeah, 239 coverage snaps overall, right? Third in yards per catch in the league, lowest completion percentage on the team for sure. 15th in cover, actually lowest completion percentage in the league of anyone that had eligible amount of snaps. 15th in coverage grade. But the big thing is the run defense and the missed tackles. Missed 18.3% of his tackles, ranked 94th out of 99 players with at least 300 snaps in run defense last year, which I think another year in the weight room is going to help a lot.
Opportunities for growth.
And just getting that. But as a free safety, man, he was awesome. Now let's get one more guy here. Kyle Kennard. And it's another one kind of like KOS where the only place to go is up, but I do think that I'm not as bullish on Kyle Kennard producing as I am about KOS because for him, he still limited snaps, but didn't do much when he was out there.
I mean, didn't do much is the understatement of the year, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, only 80 snaps, obviously.
Yeah, he played 80 snaps, but, we're talking about 0 pressures and only 2 tackles that he amassed in those 80 snaps. So you just got to hope with him in particular that he gets he has a Justin Eboigbe type bounce back in year 2 because Justin Eboigbe only got 26 snaps in 2024, and that bumped way up in 2025 after he received some homework and he was able to take to that homework, adding some good weight. He turned that into a 6-sack performance in 2025. Yeah. So if, he's able to take some of the coaching, take some of the things that the, coaching staff says that they're going to need from him and improve on that greatly, then there's an opportunity here in an edge room that, outside of the top talent, which has a lot of uncertainty there, there's an opportunity there for him to step up and take an edge 4 position if he's able to make some big adjustments.
Yeah, I mean, I truly like the edge room is so thin. I would put him up as like a roster bubble guy potentially if he can't improve massively. Yeah. But they told you Justin Eboigbe was unplayable basically as a rookie, right? I think the hard thing with Kyle Kennard specifically is like he was really good in college, obviously. he had a chance in week 18 to kind of show something, and he had a really good offensive line to do it against. And Garrett Bowles, being their left tackle with the Denver Broncos when the Chargers rested their starters, and failed to get a pressure in 24 pass rushing snaps that game and 43 pass rushing attempts, as you said. Ended up without a pressure. Anyone in the league who had at least 43 pass rushing attempts this year had a pressure. So, that's obviously, when you set the filter to that, everyone else has more snaps than him, but still. It's not a good sign, right? But at the same time, we did see Justin Herbert, and that seemed like a miracle. Maybe we'll see miracle with Kyle Kennard, but I don't think you can kind of plan your offseason based on a huge bounce back from him, because it could be a Junior Colson situation where it might just not happen, right? And we'll see what happens with that. We're not even talking about him right now, but we still have more to get into, including how much we trust Chris O'Leary to play call for the Chargers this season, coming after Jesse Minter, and what the Chargers have to do to keep the consistency through the regular season and also the playoffs, and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys that the Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years, and that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense fast, speed skating races, and hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off. Even the niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into competition. And right now, Norway has the lead, but that means you can also get the USA to end the Olympics with the most medals at plus 145, or you can go with the underdog American hockey team to win gold and potentially beat the loaded Canadian team at plus 190. That's plus money. But the Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. David, we still have more Fan Mail Friday questions to get into, and thank you to everyone for checking out today's show and the everydayers who contributed to the fan shows that we put together, because we love knowing what you guys want to hear about. And again, today there was more good ones than we're even able to fill out on the show. I get into the show, I should say. But let's start with this one here from Mac Dub, who says, how confident should Chargers fans be that Chris O'Leary can effectively make the right calls and adjustments against NFL offenses? David, what do you think?
Yeah, I think with Chris O'Leary, it's more so about the scheme that the Chargers are running that we know has been able to produce success the last couple of years. And I do feel like it was very, very important for Chris O'Leary to go to college and to really implement that defense and call plays in that defense while adding some of his own unique flavors, because we know what he's been able to do and how he's been able to impact as a position coach. He truly was able to pour into Derwin James. He was able to help Elijah Molden quite a lot, get him up to speed, get him ready to go. So we know that he's able to teach the defense and really help these players. So I feel like obviously there's going to be some growing pains at the NFL level when you're matching wits with the best coaches in the world. It's going to happen. You're going to see it, but the measure of a good coach is to be able to see if he can make those adjustments and how quickly he's going to be able to make those adjustments. But I'm confident that Chris O'Leary is going to be able to get it and get it quickly.
Yeah, I agree with you for the most part. Obviously we know the scheme works, but not everyone from that schematic tree has worked out, right? Especially Zach Orr trying to fill in for Mike McDaniel after he left, right? So the play calling specifically is a big part of that. And Jesse Minter was a great play caller as well as having a great scheme. It has to be both of those. The problem is we're not going to be able to see it, and there's no way to really know. But the one thing we do know is that he did seem to get the most out of his players last year. Obviously, it's going to be much different than the Mid-American Conference when you're going up against, Sean Payton and Andy Reid, and even, Clint Kubiak inside your division, who just led one of the top offenses in the league. But I do think that what you have to, I think he's going to do it. I do think it'll take some time. So maybe I'm not saying it'll be as soon as you think. But I think what you have to hope for is that you can get through the growing pains, right?
Yeah.
And then by the time the playoffs come around, you're starting to figure it out. Because I do think that the Chargers needed that Colts blowout loss last year. I think they needed that Jaguars blowout loss last year so they could come back and have what the performance they did against the Dallas Cowboys, who at that point had the top offense in the league. To go up in the New England Patriots, where the defense against an offense that had been really good gave the Chargers everything they needed to go win that game.
Yeah.
And the Chargers offense just didn't show up. So I do think, yes, the other part of it is he has a leg up because he knows most of this defense very well. And most of the personnel that they're going to be bringing back for the most part are going to be guys he's worked with before in 2024. And
the staff as well is mostly
staff,
the same
exactly.
as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good point. But let's get to this one here from Brian Moreno, who says, what are we going to do about staying consistent to finally get a playoff win under Jim Harbaugh? Where'd you take this one?
So first and foremost, you got to keep getting there. So the Chargers have done that back-to-back years. True. You have to get back there to be able to get another swing. So obviously that's got to be a part of it. You have to be willing to adjust and change. And I think a big example of that was him firing Greg Roman and hiring Mike McDaniel, just knowing that what he was doing wasn't working and that he had to make those changes. And he did make, a very, very important change there. So I think those are some of the things that the Chargers have to do. Obviously, they have to pour into the offensive line. That has to happen. Yeah. They got to spend big money on that. They have to be very intentional about that. They have to keep killing the draft like they have the last couple of years. But those are all things in my mind that they have to do to continue to be consistent and, get that chance to get that playoff win.
Totally agree with you on all points there. I think especially, the offensive line, like give them an average offensive line the last 2 years and they probably would have already won one, right?
Yeah.
I think the other thing too that can't go kind of unmentioned is just that, like, you just have to have a better team. Look at the team that won the Super Bowl the last 2 years, right? Like if you have a fatal flaw, it will get exposed when you get to the playoffs. And the other part of it is you just have to get better play from your quarterback, right? And Mike McDaniel will be a huge part of that because you feel like you have someone that can get the most out of Herbert, even against really good defenses, right? And not have to have him carry the ball 20 times like he did against the Eagles, or just kind of have to like scrap it out to get there on Monday Night Football. But someone who can also help him get into a rhythm when he's slumping too and be able to get the offense back on track so it doesn't disappear for long stretches at a time like it has in both of their last 2 playoff games. But we have one more here from Eddie Castro, who says, I have 2 questions. How are the Chargers building consistency so the team finishes strong in close games? And what message do you have for Chargers fans who stayed loyal despite a heartbreak year after year? Let's go Chargers. Dave, let's start with the first part of things here as far as the Chargers finishing close games consistently.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have an effective running game to be able to churn out the clock towards the end of games. You have to improve your red zone play calling. That's got to be really important. And you have to protect your quarterback, and you have to make sure that you're doing all those things at a very, very high level. And so that's one of the things we've seen in the last few years is just the red zone play calling has been really, really bad. And I think with Mike McDaniel, the rushing, concepts and the rushing output is going to be a lot more efficient under him. And that's going to help you close out games more consistently.
Here's the other thing. The Chargers were good in 1-score games this year. I mean, they went 6-2 in 1-score games and won, 75% of the 1-score games that they had. The only 2 losses came against the Giants in the first game that, where Omarion Hampton got hurt. Joe All also, ended up getting hurt. And then also you have the Texans game, which the Chargers defense just couldn't get off the field. There was the bad holding call. They're having illegal contact downfield. And they were kind of trending in the right direction. They had just gone down and scored a touchdown. They lost 2016, never ended up getting the ball back in that game. So, and also you had the Cameron Dicker, right? Missed field goal and a missed extra point. You had 1-score wins against Kansas City both times, against the Broncos, against the Eagles, against the Titans, and against the Mike McDaniel Dolphins back then, right? But yeah, I think having an offensive line that can give Herbert a chance late in games is a huge part of it, just because it's like if you 2 of those games, right? Against the Dolphins and against, obviously, in the other game against the Broncos, he had guys falling off of him as he's making the plays
trying to yank
to
him
go
down,
win the game. And he will have to go Superman at some point, but hopefully he doesn't have to as many times. Even Philadelphia, right, where it just like you had no passing game, you had no running game, and the only running game you did have was Justin Herbert putting his body on the line a week after breaking his left hand.
While he's getting absolutely abused.
Yeah, so I think, they were good, right? And they've shown they can be pretty good in 1-score games and be disciplined in those moments. And Justin Herbert has shown that throughout his career, that he is, one of the more clutch quarterbacks in the league in those scenarios. Needed to translate to the playoffs, but in the regular season, he's been very good in those situations when given a chance. But David, any message that you want to send to Chargers fans, obviously, who were in the same boat as you, right? Having your heart broken year after year and continuing to come back to this, masochistic team, I guess I would say.
Well, I've covered this team for, over 10 years. I've watched a lot of bad Chargers teams, a lot of teams that just didn't even come close, whether it was a coach that you didn't feel like was in the same echelon as the coaches you were going up against, or if the defense wasn't good enough. I think the reason why I'm optimistic is because you have a head coach and a general manager that are doing whatever they can to try to leave no stone unturned to improve the team, and a guy that has a proven track record of success that's got the team to the playoffs in back-to-back seasons while navigating different schedules. Easy schedules, difficult schedules, they've been able to get there. And I feel very confident that this offseason, they have the resources and they are close enough with the pieces already on the team to put together another winning team and a team that will win in the playoffs. And you just have to sit there. I know it's hard. I know it's frustrating. I have definitely spent quite a few nights being angry at this football team, but I know once we do get to experience that sweet, beautiful, euphoric feeling of winning a playoff game and then winning another one and then winning a Super Bowl, all of the anger, all of the frustration and pain that we went through will all be worth it.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? You continue to tell yourself that. I mean, my first message would be, what are you doing? But to stop doing this to yourself. Don't let your kids be fans. No, I mean, it is one of those things where it's like you can't really help who you like for the most part, right? Like when you turn on the TV, you either feel something or you don't. And I think the other thing is Chargers fans who've been watching these games know that Justin Herbert is good enough to go get you one, right? Like you have a quarterback that can do it. If he can play the same way we've seen him play at times in his career, it's good enough to go on a run and do something special. So I think the big thing is just obviously scar tissue buildup and, having gone through so many things still doesn't make it easier, but it does make it, that you want it that much more and make it, the trash talk you have to other fans that much better if they finally do get one and you do feel like they have a chance. So like it would be different if they were just a 3-win team year in year out. I don't know how many people would be left, but
imagine
it
being
does
a Raiders
feel like
fan.
They have a chance right now to at least be competing every year and contending, and that's really what you wanted when you brought in Jim Harbaugh. But that's gonna wrap things up for today's show. We'll be back with you guys on Monday with whatever latest news comes out. Still positions on this coaching staff that had to be filled. Also some reports out there now that maybe Tyler Linderbaum has a real chance to hit free agency, and that the Chargers are interested in that. So to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. If you want to call into the show, we couldn't get the voicemails on tonight, but if you want to call into the show, you can also do that at 323-524-7924 and leave your 30-second Chargers voicemail there. And if you want an ad-free version of the audio podcast, you can get that now with the Locked On Everydayer Club, which you can find in the show notes. $5 a month just for, if you don't want ads, you can get that there, right? A little bit more, but you always still get the same free 5 shows a week you always get from us, as it is your team every day. And we will be back with you guys on Monday with the latest. Also going to do Stay or Go next week with all of the Chargers and pending free agents. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.